Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon once again. My name is Anthony Ogden. I'm the Managing Director here at Gateway International Group, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Gateway, entitled Emerging EdTech Solutions for International Enrollment Management. We have a terrific panel arranged for you today, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into today's discussion. Before we do that, let me take a moment to acknowledge today's our partners with the Gateway Leadership Institute. Today is our third and final webinar, public webinar associated with the Spring 2021 Gateway Leadership Institute. Our strategic partners with the Institute this time around are Teradata, Intellippear, and today we have Jay Shellam here from Intellippear, and I'm looking forward to his comments. We also have Off We Go, Conversify, and QS, and we have a couple of folks today from QS, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into today's webinar with their presentations, as well as other presentations today from Brian Whalen from AIRC, as well as representatives from Millersville University of Pennsylvania, and so on. Terrific panel. Now, also, the Gateway Leadership Institute is sponsored by these organizations there on the screen: CET Academic Programs, VIA TRM, Shorelight, VIEW, Synorbis, Virtual Education, Virtual Internships, SEPA Foundation, Hewlett-Packard, and Podium Education. If you're not familiar with these organizations, I would encourage you to do so. They are really moving and shaking and advancing how we engage international higher education programming today here in the United States and around the world. Today's webinar will be moderated by our colleagues, Dr. Rosa Almaguera from EduAlamo and Dr. George Kasenga from Purdue University Northwest, and also are the facilitators for the Gateway Leadership Institute generally. So with that, let me once again thank our panel, thank George and Rosa, and thank all of you for joining us today. We have a lively discussion ahead. And again, if you're just joining us, take a moment to please introduce yourself in the chat. And as you'll also see there on the bottom of your screen, you can also pose questions there in the Q&A. And with that, over to Rosa and George.
Great, thank you so much. Rosa, did you have any comments you wanted to lead with?
Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you, George. And just as Tony said, to remind everyone to put, please, their questions for the panelists. We'll be following them so that we can, at the end, have them for our 4 panelists. And other than that, thank you everyone for joining us today. And we're really looking forward to hearing from our presenters.
Great, thank you, Rosa. And please feel free to use the Q&A feature that is built into the webinar software that will help us organize those questions, and then we'll get to those at the end of the presentation today. Now, we have 4 great presenters today. Again, my name is George Kasenga. I'm the Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions and with some SIO roles at Purdue University Northwest. But our topic today about emerging EdTech solutions for international enrollment management is so timely for so many of you. So we're grateful to have you here today. Leading our session today is going to be Brian Whalen, the Executive Director of the American International Recruitment Council. We're thrilled to have him with a leading organization in the United States and really around the world, giving us some broad perspective on what we can expect in this area. Next, we have Dr. Patricia, who is able to give us some perspectives and insights from a scholar practitioner at Millersville University. Next, in the presentation, we will have Jay Shellam, who will be speaking from the perspective of Intellippear, a partner and again, strategic partner of the Gateway Leadership Institute, but very valuable insights. And then we'll be closing the presentation with Edward Harcourt, who's the Senior Vice President at QS, who will be sharing some new data from a survey that they've conducted that's really going to help get our minds going for the Q&A session that will follow and position all of you attending today to go back to your organizations and have some really informed discussion about how you can move forward. So with that, our first speaker is going to be Brian Whalen with the American International Recruitment Council, and I will pass it over to Brian.
Thanks very much, George, and thank you, Rosa, as well. Thank you, Tony and May, for the invitation. Wonderful to be part of this Gateway webinar here as part of your institute. I'm just going to share my screen here so you can see, hopefully, my slide presentation. I'll start with giving just a brief background about the American International Recruitment Council, and you'll understand why that's important as we get towards the end of my presentation here in a few minutes. First, AIRC is a 501c3 membership association, and we focus on quality assurance and expertise for the international enrollment management field. We're recognized as a standards development organization by the U.S. Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. And AIRC members are accredited secondary and post-secondary institutions, pathway programs, global institutions, and educational recruitment agencies. AIRC standards and guidelines are the ways in which we provide our quality assurance to serve the best interests of students and also to help our members to achieve their goals. Here, fresh off the press, is the mission statement and new vision statement for AIRC. I'll just focus here on the vision statement, which is that we aspire to have every student have a standards-based recruitment and enrollment experience. That's the goal of AIRC. Again, focusing on the quality of that experience to benefit students and of course to benefit the institutions, agencies, everyone involved in international education enrollment in that process. Just briefly, a little bit about our member services and benefits, highlighting our conference in Miami, which will be in person, we expect, in December of 2021. This could be the first major gathering of an international education association post-pandemic. We're certainly planning for that, and we hope that you'll consider attending. It's a wonderful collegial environment, sessions, workshops, focusing on international student recruitment, a wonderful place to meet colleagues and also to meet prospective partners with our agency members. Of course, during the year, AIRC conducts webinars and workshops like many membership associations do. We're engaged in data collection and analysis, and we have a professional certificate course in international student recruitment and enrollment planning. So I recommend, if you'd like to find out more, you can follow the links. This will be available, I think, afterwards, and all of these are hyperlinked to our website for more information. Now, I really want to focus on educational recruitment agencies and talk about an emerging model that we're seeing from our membership and from the field. First, though, a definition. AIRC's definition of an educational agency has intentionally been broad throughout the time that AIRC has been doing this work since 2008. And here it is: an organization, company, or association that represents, recruits, and refers students to accredited educational institutions on a fee-for-service basis. So that's the definition that we use for educational agencies. Now, over the years, we've seen that the types of agencies, the models that they follow, the business operations that they employ, those change, like in any field or any industry. They evolve. And so we have many different types. I've listed 4 of them here. And of course, these are not pure types, right? There's overlap between these different models. And you may find that some have characteristics of a mom and pop agency, which is a very high touch, more personalized approach, a smaller entity that's involved, with a fully virtual agency, which is another type where all of the services are conducted completely online. You're familiar with pathway programs, which have evolved over the last several years and have partnerships with institutions to help run programs for those institutions, bringing students into the universities through appropriate orientation, supplemental work sometimes, and special curricula. And we also have large master agencies, which work with a whole range of smaller sub-agencies, which filter student inquiries and student business up to the master agency, which then has special relationships or partnerships with institutions. So these models have evolved over the years to meet the demands of the market, the demands of consumers, and of potential partners. Now, a little bit about institution-agency partnerships, just some data for you to consider from two recent surveys. NACAC and AIRC, AIRC, American International Recruitment Council. I use the acronym AIRC. In February of this year, we conducted a survey that showed that almost half of the responding institutions from our respective memberships currently partner with educational agencies to recruit undergraduate international students. And this seems to represent overall growth based on a NACAC survey from a few years ago. Private institutions were more likely than public institutions to have agent partnerships, 60% to roughly 40%. And then 5% of the institutions surveyed reported that they're actively exploring agency partnerships as a result of the pandemic. So we're seeing a trend towards more and more partnerships with agencies to help recruit students. There's a link to the survey results. This survey on the other side of the slide is from the Association of Boarding Schools, which recently surveyed its members. Those are the most active secondary institutions in the United States in terms of recruiting international students. And here you can see that 82% report using agencies, or partnering with agencies, I should say, to recruit international students. And then a number saying that they'd like to, they're considering in the near future pursuing partnerships, almost 12% of schools reporting that. So this is here to stay for sure and is growing. And we know during the pandemic, many institutional efforts have been stymied because of difficulties of travel and budget challenges. And so agency partnerships have taken on an importance like never before. Now, I'd like to talk a bit about this new emerging model, which we call an agency aggregator model. And in thinking about this over the weekend, I thought, you know, we've grown accustomed to aggregators in many aspects of our lives, job searches and staffing aggregators, shopping. I did some online shopping this weekend. You know, Amazon was my go-to source there to see what I could find, the best deals, and looking at consumer reviews and so on. There are real estate aggregators. All of us travel when there's not a pandemic going on. And we use airline and hotel and travel aggregators, and we get our news through news aggregators. So these online aggregators are really driving the growth of the internet economy. And here, this model depicts, I think it's from an energy association, depicting how energy is also aggregated to market, where you have different generators with one central aggregator that supplies the power and sells it to the market, and then assumes the market revenue that comes from that. So this is a really ubiquitous part of our lives, isn't it? Now, I got messed up with one of my slides, sorry. Now, let's look at the characteristics of these educational agency aggregators, because they have taken on a particular form, a particular business model. They are single platforms where students can search for and apply to educational institutions. So we might compare it to the Common App in the United States that students utilize to apply simultaneously to many different institutions. This aggregator communicates with and monitors and pays a large number of educational agencies that refer students to them. And I refer you to a recent article in University World News, Priest and Nicole, who proposed their view and different examples of agency aggregators. It's a very useful article to look at. The aggregators end up having revenue sharing agreements with their partners, the educational institutions. And if a student attends an institution based on the aggregator services, the aggregator receives a payment. And in this model, you can see there's a robust sharing of data among agency and institutional partners and the students involved as well. Why has this happened now? I think there's several reasons for it. The technological advances in artificial intelligence, students, they like this way of finding out about potential choices and decisions they have to make. So it's driven by their online searches for educational opportunities. The COVID lockdowns, of course, are causing this trend to accelerate. And venture capital and investors see an opportunity. So they're investing in these kinds of aggregators. You can see online shopping is something that during the pandemic has taken off. We're all getting much more used to it. We have curbside pickup and all kinds of ways that we're getting goods and services now that we didn't consider before. Now, a question that we can legitimately ask here is what happens to quality during this kind of shift to a new model of agency work within this space? Well, this is where ERC comes in. I described ERC earlier as a quality assurance organization, and we're focused on development and promotion of standards of good practice for partnerships between educational agencies and partnering institutions. And the standards and the certification process that we employ is modeled after the higher education accrediting standards, involves a self-study, trained reviewers looking at documentation and conducting site visits of the agency that's under consideration for certification. And all of this provides the foundation for an ethical and high quality international student enrollment process. And there you see there's a history of this work with ERC that has developed over time, principles that we follow, guidelines that we promote, and a certification commission that's objective, an objective body that oversees this work. Wanted to give you now a little bit in the weeds just quickly, because I think it's important to understand how these standards can apply to situations like with aggregators who are doing this work with many different types of sub-agencies, different types of partners, a high volume of students. Nonetheless, the same standards that apply to a mom and pop educational agency doing its work also apply on a scale of the aggregator. So in terms of transparency, these questions would be part of a self-study and part of the ways in which a peer reviewer, a reviewer of the agency, would make judgments about how they're meeting the standards of good practice. How are services, fees, and refunds made clear and transparent to all sub-agencies, institutional partners, students, and families? How does the organization ensure that promises that are made are kept? And then accuracy. How does the organization maintain accuracy and maintaining partner information? How's the information updated and kept secure? How does the organization maintain accuracy in marketing content? This is part of the process of ensuring that an organization is meeting those standards, asking these questions and seeing documentation about how those principles are being met. Selection, training, evaluation of sub-agency partners, extremely important. And then maintaining confidentiality, especially with our data privacy laws, such as the GDPR. And then achieving accountability, practicing continuous improvement, and surveying institutional and student clients for satisfaction, for example. So all of these standards are at play when it comes to aggregators, as they are for any type of model that an agency might utilize. And these are just a few examples. There are 5 different standards areas that ERC has developed with 40 different questions or prompts that need to be addressed. For more information, here's a link to the certification standards and the agency certification process. And then if you're interested in who has been going through this, who has been certified, you can access that as publicly available. So you can see those agencies that have decided to hold themselves up to the standards and to achieve that certification and recognition from AIRC. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Brian. And it is interesting how the transition is happening of the recruitment agencies and these international modalities switching into an EdTech space, and how our institutions and organizations are reacting to that. So we'll get into the Q&A about some of that, so thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Patrice Campbell at Millersville University. She's a scholar practitioner in this area, and international recruitment and admissions is part of her portfolio. And so I'll hand it over to you, Patrice. You might be muted. There you go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you all so much for having me here today. My name is Patrice Campbell, and I am the director of the Office of the International Programs and Services Department at Millersville University here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is in Amish country, if you're wondering. I'm a former international student and from Jamaica, and thank you so much, George and Rosa, for the invite to be a part of this conversation regarding EdTech. So a brief history in terms of international enrollment here at Millersville. And I think it's important to have a snippet of where we were prior to COVID for people to best understand why we are doing the things that we have been doing. So when I arrived at Millersville 5 years ago, my position was brand new. It was a part of the strategic initiative to increase international students on campus. However, international admissions was not a part of the portfolio, and all that was a part of the strategy was on-ground recruitment and a few webinars here and there. So maybe 2 years later, we created a strategic enrollment management document that gave us a little bit more intentional work being done in this, in webinars or use of technology and everything to supplement the major on-ground recruitment that was taking place. And we also looked at revamping our retention and student success processes here at Millersville. And this isn't unique, right? Most institutions, when they're just starting off, they hit the ground running, so to speak. So as mentioned, prior to COVID, it was just some web affairs, some digital marketing, but definitely on-ground recruitment. And the question that people often have now is, why change now? COVID basically said, you know what, it's time for us to change. But before COVID, the big elephant in the room is, if we weren't doing EdTech prior to COVID, what does that mean for us? That means that we were probably behind the 8 ball, behind the trend, and we're more rushing now to keep up and to make any type of headway if we were never doing something prior. So we have travel limitations now, whether or not it's because of government closures, visa restrictions, and things like that. But prior to that, we had issues with external competitions with other countries. China is now taking students as much as they're sending students, right? So it's important for us to be able to just recognize that we're no longer the only thing in town. And for years, we've been talking about how we recruit and retain here at Millersville international students. How do we use more types of engagement tools and meeting students and families where they are? So Brian spoke about the aggregators where there's a one-stop shop opportunity, but there's so many more ways where schools were having to go and get the students. So for us at Millersville, we've been doing a lot of digital marketing, lead generation, and but that means that we need to go to the experts, the ones who are able to help us with or data analytics. Virtual reality is a big thing right now in terms of getting our international students to be able to visit our campus. However, one of the focus that we've been doing is looking at our application processing. How are we verifying things? How are we streamlining and being as efficient as we can, especially in a time where our human resources are limited. You know, many of us are losing staff members, whether or not it's budget cuts prior to COVID or because of COVID. But those are some of the things that we are challenged with. I think I've been fortunate to have researched and implement a variety of tools using some of the companies that I know that Gateway has partnered with, especially Teradata and Study Portals and Flywire and things like that on the international enrollment management side of things. And one of the things that I wanted for us to talk about is the fact that we're in the midst of implementing the slate for our international admissions, a slate instance, along with the bells and whistles when it comes to relationship building, especially for agents, as well as Synapses to help us to manage the international student and scholar side of things. So when we're looking at partners or EdTech companies, I think it's important that we're doing our research. As Brian mentioned, there's so many companies out there, and there's so many companies that we know that are kind of getting into this EdTech field, and therefore they're trying a new product out on us in a way. So it's important for us to recognize that there's volume that's there. Do your research, come to webinars such as these, use your network to find out what's working. It's important to know that just because it worked for one school, if it's not a similar school to you, it might not be a good fit. However, once you found and implemented a product or have a partner that is a good fit for you, you have that built-in knowledge. You have almost like a plug and play product that helps to boost your enrollment goals. And again, because we're all suffering in a sense from or lack of workforce in some cases, and our budgets are being slashed, these EdTech partners also helps to alleviate some of the stress that we might have. So after COVID, what happens? What's the future of international recruitment? You know, what I would say is that if you haven't looked at a strategic enrollment management plan in the past, or your plan does not incorporate the use of EdTech or account for what has happened with COVID, right now is a time to create a plan. What does international travel look like? Are you going to now no longer travel? Because some of us have had success. We've been able to circumnavigate the globe this year because of web fairs. We are seeing so many more countries that we would have never seen in terms of applications. So what does that mean? Do we ditch what we've done, or do we stick with what we have and use, instead of focusing on international travel, do we supplement what we're doing? And that's just going to be a drastic shift from pre-COVID. But, and I will say this, and this is from me as a former international student, how are we looking at retention, right? We can't look at recruitment and admissions without looking at the retention of our students. How are we changing how we orient the students? How are we changing how they're transitioning? For us, we have done so much in regards to online orientation, making sure that we have everything in D2L or Blackboard or one of those types of use of technology. And we're also implementing some student success seminars for our students. So for us, my apologies, everyone. How are we moving towards a way for our students to be able to access us and making sure that we're using the tech that's out there? And I forgot to mention about the English proficiency. We have all started, for the most part, using temporarily the English proficiency test because they have now made themselves more accessible to students because of so many of the offices closed down. And now we have decisions to make, things that we have made temporarily okay. Are we now post-COVID going to continue with that? Or would we then go back to where we were? So there's just so many things that we need to consider. And I'm excited for what COVID did, even though that's bad to say. I think it allowed for so much opportunities for many of us. And I am available to answer any questions that you might have post this during the Q&A. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Patrice. I mean, I really appreciate that perspective as a scholar practitioner. And really, for many sectors of the economy, while the pandemic has imposed many hardships, it has also forced innovation and pushed us forward 5 or 10 years in some cases to innovate and move to the next best thing. So thank you, Patrice, and I look forward to the Q&A. Next, we have Jay Shlem here to speak with us from IntelliPeer, one of our strategic partners, but a leading partner for many institutions and organizations in the US. So let me pass on to Jay, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you, Rosa, May, George, Tony, for the invite. Appreciate the opportunity to share here today. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. You all can see my screen, hopefully. All righty. Yep, just by way of brief introduction, my name is Jay Shlem. I'm the Partner Success Manager with IntelliPeer. And once again, I'm very, very thankful and excited to be a part of the Leadership Institute this year. My objective here is to help you learn how true omni-channel communications in higher ed can help reach and engage on a more personal level with prospective international students, faculty, as well as alumni. And I'm going to try not to boil the ocean here today. I don't want to speak over, at too much of a high level. However, but what I will do is cover what CPaaS and omni-channel communications is, why I think it's important that those in higher ed embrace the technology, and share with you some practical applications that can be applied quickly and seamlessly, all the while improving processes and making for better experiences for all students. Kind of to begin, what is CPaaS? What is omni-channel? How can it be applied in higher education, and why, when implemented, can it be a huge game changer for those tasked with improving such things as prospective student outreach, developing marketing strategies, and overall student experiences. First, let's tackle what CPaaS is, or Communications Platform as a Service, or omni-channel communications in general, if you will. And how does it differentiate itself from more traditional communication strategies, specifically multi-channel? By way of definition, Communications Platform as a Service, or CPaaS as we call it, is a cloud-based communication solution that combines voice, SMS, or text messaging, chat, social media, artificial intelligence, and other cloud communications channels to create unforgettable omni-channel interactions, meeting your students where they are, and more importantly, on the channels they prefer. Currently, CPaaS is disrupting the traditional business market in communications by providing a solution that can be customized to specific needs by embedding communications into applications and workflows. CPaaS gives institutions greater levels of customization, from pre-built applications to application-based programming interfaces. Many of you have heard of APIs. In short, CPaaS enables your organization's applications to communicate, which is real timely when you're talking about workforce shortages, things of that nature, allowing folks to self-serve, students to get answers to repetitive type questions and things of that nature. Another great example of how we see CPaaS being used today in general, just from a high level, is of course Amazon and how they use CPaaS and omni-channel. They meet you where you are, say on their app or using chat. You place an order with your thumbs, you buy, pay, and get shipping and delivery updates without ever having to interact with a live human being. If you want to speak to a live human being, you can switch channels, you can press talk, and they provide that option on a CPaaS platform, all on one platform, and we've all seen this in our everyday lives. The new generation, as we know, is on mobile. They're on chat, they're on social media, they're on WhatsApp, and in order to bring these channels together and make them available, you need a robust CPaaS platform to do all that. And just by way of just a quick re-emphasis, to emphasize the difference between omni-channel and multi-channel. Omni-channel delivers a consistent user experience approach, creating fluidity, making available multiple channels, allowing the user to change the channel. When I say channel, voice, SMS, chat, maybe they're engaging with an AI bot, whatever the case, it allows that student or alumni, whatever the case may be, to change channels within that interaction without having to move away. And that communication allows for more fluidity, whereas multi-channel simply makes channels available in a more single-threaded or siloed approach, basically just providing separate channels. Briefly, let's take a look. How does omni-channel meet the needs of higher ed? A CPaaS platform deploying omni-channel can help right now and into the future with things like application workflow automation, offering self-serve capabilities, and with student and alumni and faculty notifications. This allows you to meet and communicate with your prospective students and alumni on the channels they prefer, like SMS, social, WhatsApp, chatbots, using conversational AI, things like language detection, great use case in the international student world, natural language processing, speech to text, text to speech, those sorts of things, as well as sentiment and tonality. With workflow automation, your organization can do things like streamline and personalize student enrollment in the application process. You can send after interaction surveys, set follow-up appointments, send reminders, all along the way, posting all the data to your internal CRMs, databases, making on-the-fly updates, adds, changes as to what's going on within the application or during conversations. And to put a fine point on it, it's all about a consistent journey for each student and collecting the most accurate data possible to ensure a smooth journey and positive student experience. Some great applications we've seen, for workflow automation is in the, just to reiterate, is in the area of enrollment management. Omnichannel, again, allows you to focus on personalized experiences, reaching out in multiple languages, reaching and serving individual students. Focusing on the way students prefer to engage leads to improving enrollment yields. Omnichannel also enables universities to market, I should say, on a more one-to-one basis to each prospective student. The platform offers, real-time analysis for every phase of the student journey, from university and program selection to alumni status. It allows universities to manage the enrollment funnel from, say, prospect to inquiries to applicants to admits, deposited, and finally enrolled, and do it on a one-on-one basis, right? One student at a time with a personalized approach, excuse me. So, implementing student focused solutions are easily deployed with a platform such as CPAS, and these types of solutions or these types of measures lead to results-driven communications. You can utilize data to measure more effectively the engagement campaigns that you've implemented, and identify the best communication channels that currently being used. This also supports increased contact rates during admission cycles. Omnichannel can support recruitment and admissions offices during high volume seasons when activities may triple in number. Carefully as well design digital touch points to serve potential students more effectively. And then finally, you can utilize platforms such as I would say ours or Omnichannel in general to push out student surveys automatically after interactions and post the results to your database, use those insights to improve your effectiveness, and all along ensuring the highest levels of satisfaction. Self-serve capabilities. I've heard several folks touch on limited resources at this time during the pandemic. We can see where automation and digitization has really taken over from some of the normal things, just everyday things of like eating a meal. We've had to go off to accomplish these things on more digital channels. Within the process of student recruitment and within higher education realms, it's no different. Allowing students to reach out via their preferred communication method to self-serve, to get answers to questions, and timing is of the essence, right? Maybe you can provide options to get them information that's sitting on an FAQ sheet somewhere. You're getting a ton of repetitive inquiries into the university or college, and you want to offload those to digital channels and provide immediate answers to questions. And that information can be delivered up via what we call an API call, a dip into a database, allowing the student to self-serve and self-satisfy. And then finally here, another great use case we've seen is for large-scale alerts for student and faculty notifications. You can see as well as in the world that we live in today, the emergencies happen, things happen, not just COVID, but on campus emergencies, things of that nature. Folks need to change classes, times need to be rescheduled. These automated notifications can be pushed out one to many. And again, to facilitate those things, again, to reschedule events, schedule meetings, send reminders, set forth updates, whatever the situation may call for. With a CPAS or omnichannel platform, higher ed in general can begin future-proofing their institutions and reducing costs by automating processes and not having to buy what we've seen so often in the market, prepackaged off-the-shelf solutions that lack flexibility and are very expensive at scale. Again, institutions of higher education are faced with some pretty unique challenges. As we mentioned here, enrollment management, emergency notifications, communications with international and study abroad students. And again, we believe while these challenges can be daunting, they can also be executed effectively to build these stronger relationships while saving time and money using an omnichannel CPaaS platform. Best thing, CPaaS solutions can be easily integrated into existing workflows for additional communication channels, and automation help to keep you stay focused on what really matters, and that's education. Briefly,
Thank you, Jay. This is really, really interesting.
Yeah, lastly, why CPaaS? Why omni-channel? Because it creates stellar student interactions. There are a number of benefits that CPaaS offers compared to traditional business communications. Easy deployment, very flexible. It offers cost savings options or opportunities, I should say. It's highly customizable. You can deploy things like AI bots, create self-service options in multiple languages, intelligent interaction management, because a CPaaS platform integrates seamlessly with third-party systems and CRMs, that data collection is seamless. Integrating with social channels, again, meet your students where they are. Integrated sentiment analysis using AI bots. And as well, interactive or interaction reporting, to track all that data across each touch point. And finally, automated notifications, again, just to reiterate. So all these products can be integrated to capture all actionable data across all channels. Think of it as actionable intelligence. And again, real-time dashboards are available. Biggest thing, finally, I'll say beyond that, really where the digital piece comes in, the best part about a CPaaS platform is it works 24/7, 365, no vacation, no lunch breaks, no bathroom breaks, and that's the power of automation. Again, it's something that can be deployed 100% in the cloud. It's easy, just have an internet connection, some credentials and a browser, and you're off and running, building these new student experiences that we know are in high demand today. So I know I probably went over my time limit, but that's all I got. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and I hope that that was helpful.
No, thank you so much, Jay. And one of the things that's so important is that while we're talking about enrollment, some of these solutions have real opportunities to serve other dimensions of the university. That makes it an attractive option. So thank you for that. We'll get to some Q&A for you. But next we want to hear from Edward Harcourt with QS, and really excited to hear some of the outcomes from a recent survey they had and insights from Edward. So thank you, Edward. Are you available, or are you there?
Yes, I am, George. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, sir. And you could go ahead and share your screen. It should take over mine. There you go.
Great, fantastic.
Thank you.
Just put this into slideshow. Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thanks to the team at Gateway for the invitation. I'm Edward Harcourt. I'm a Senior Vice President at QS. Like Patrice, I was an international student in the US. I did my PhD at Vanderbilt many years ago. So it's great to be back with colleagues in the US for this afternoon's session. Colleagues will be familiar with QS, perhaps from the global rankings that we produce of international universities, but we also play in a number of other spaces in the student recruitment and talent attraction space. And I'm with the Enrollment Solutions Division, in addition to being on the board of QS and the managing director of an Anglo-Australian business. We, at the moment, pretty exclusively service UK and Australian university enrollment management programs. It's a white label service at QS Enrollment Solutions, and we do offer a pretty full suite of services. It was very interesting, Jay, listening to you talk about omni-channel comms. We use the Twilio Flex platform in our omni-channel communications, giving students all of the flexibility that you were describing earlier. And the two core services that we offer are inquiry management and offer management, but we can continue to engage with students through beyond their point of commencement. But I'm not here to talk about enrollment solutions this afternoon. It's the insights and strategy bit that I want to highlight today, because QS has been taking fortnightly pulse surveys of international applicants all around the world, motivated young people who've remained largely undeterred in their pursuit of international education opportunity. And I'd just like to give you a few headlines of the survey results that we have recently produced that say some interesting things about changing perceptions of the United States as a destination country. International applicants are telling us interesting things around the coronavirus vaccine rollout and what their expectations would be. And then if there is time, George, I suspect there won't be, but I was going to just highlight a little bit of the kind of machine learning and predictive analytics work that we're doing to strengthen our ability to prioritize our counseling services on applicants who are most likely to complete the enrollment journey. But in the interest of time, I think I'll have to leave that in the slide deck for you to look at your leisure after the call. So I mentioned the fortnightly pulse surveys. We've been running them since February 2020, just before the lockdown, and we've had a good number of responses from over 180 countries. And this has really allowed us to put a finger on the pulse of those changing attitudes and study intentions throughout the pandemic. And I'll put the link in the chat to the website where you can access for free the reports that we've been producing. We also run the world's largest international student survey of pre-enrolled international students. Now in its ninth year, we've had over 100,000 responses in 2021. About a third of those have declared an interest in studying in the United States, and 320 US universities have taken part in this survey. And its early results from this survey, this has not yet been published, that I'm going to talk to you today. And there's some good news about changing perceptions of the US on the back of that little election you had at the end of 2020. So the good news is, what proportion of prospective international students believe that the US has become more or much more welcoming to students from their country in the last year? And you'll be pleased to know that 58% in our survey of prospective international students who are thinking about studying in the US think that that within their country, people are becoming more or much more, that the US is becoming more or much more welcoming to students from their country. And how has that positive sentiment towards the US grown in core recruitment markets? Well, in all of the major markets from which American institutions are looking to recruit, well, some of the major markets, China and India, Canada, notably north of the border, Brazil in Latin America, and Germany in Western Europe, there's been a very positive uptick. This survey was completed after the inauguration of the Biden-Harris administration, and we're seeing, I think, a very clear response in international applicant sentiment now to the changing political climate in the US. On the question of how well have countries handled the coronavirus pandemic and the vaccination rollout, again, of students who declared an interest in studying in the United States, the United States is, well, it's above the United Kingdom, put it that way, but there are other countries, notably those with very strict border controls. New Zealand and Australia, as you'll know, have remained largely quarantined within their own borders, are judged to have handled the pandemic either very well or fairly well. And those who have managed vaccinations the best, will hear the US and the UK get a higher appreciation from international applicants for managing the vaccine rollout a little better than other countries. Now, how important is this? Well, 55% of respondents said that the way a government has managed the pandemic has made them reconsider their choice of study destination. And almost 3/4 of respondents, again of students who declared an interest in studying in the United States, felt that the US had not handled the pandemic well. Now, that is an impression drawn obviously through media representation of the way in which the US has handled the crisis, and the link between how well a country has managed the pandemic and student recruitment is obviously very complex, as countries like Australia, who have had a very strict closed border policy, are now really seeing a quite catastrophic decline in inquiry and applicant numbers this year, because of the perception that it's just going to be incredibly difficult to get into the country. And what applicants have been telling us throughout the coronavirus crisis is that they are prepared to commence their studies online, but they want to see a route to getting on campus by the second semester. And in Australia at the moment, I think that's very difficult for them to do. What are their views on vaccines? Well, this is a student pulse survey that we ran a couple of weeks ago. This is not just students who are interested in studying in the United States. This is any English language destination country around the world. And when we asked what proportion of international students think universities should make it mandatory for on-campus students to have a coronavirus vaccine, they were pretty much split 50-50, with 49% of prospective international students thinking that it should be mandatory. So maybe some very difficult policy decisions there for universities on campus to debate. Would you have the coronavirus vaccine if it was offered to you? Again, these are results from students who are looking at many English language destination countries, and over 2/3 were prepared to take the vaccine if it was offered to them. So those, George, are some very quick highlights of the survey that we have run very recently, the International Student Survey. I'll post in the chat a link to the result. And in the interest of time, I think it's just going to be very difficult for me to do justice to the last section I was going to talk about, which is predictive analytics and the way in which this can really have quite a dramatic impact on your conversion rate of international applicants if you're prioritizing your communications on applicants who've shown a high propensity to continue their journey down the funnel. But I'll leave those slides in the deck that I'm sure you'll share after the call, because we want to get some questions in, I'm sure, before the session ends.
Well, and Edward, what I wanted to ask is, while this is recorded, people have access to the presentation afterwards. If people wanted to learn a little bit more, follow up with QS about the topics that we won't be able to cover today, what is the way for them to reach out? Or if you could put that in the chat box, that would be of great help.
Yeah, be very happy to put that in the chat box, and then folks can reach out to us. We're not currently offering enrollment solutions in the United States, but we're looking very closely at the market opportunity in the US.
No, that's perfect. And what you shared is really thought-provoking and good. I posted in the chat that we're going to extend our Q&A to about 5 minutes after the hour, because we did want to hear what, make sure we could hear everything you had to offer. And I think this has worked really well. In the Q&A section, Rosa, if you were there, have you been monitoring some Q&A?
We have a question for Brian. Corinne asked her, if we can, I got the...
Oh, sorry, Rosa. I just answered that by typing that in.
Well, if you don't mind, Brian, can you talk a little bit about this and whether, EdTechs can be agencies or not, which is another question.
Oh, there was another question about that? I didn't see that.
No.
Well, in regard to the question, I wasn't exactly sure what the person meant, but I was assuming it had to do with the Title IV prohibition on payment of commission for the placement of students who are eligible for federal financial aid, example, US citizens. And, it could be that this regulation confused the issue for commission for the placement of international students. And I am aware, because one of my fellow staff members alerted me to the fact that there were abuses in domestic placement in the early 20th century in the US. And so maybe this had a lingering negative effect, favoritism and high commissions and a pay to play kind of approach. So, that could be the reason for that regulation. And then it influenced the ways in which commissions were looked at in terms of agency partnerships, which now, of course, have become more widely accepted.
Rosa, if you don't mind, may I ask the panel a question?
Yes, of course.
Folks, very specifically, if you don't mind to say, what are or who are the specific EdTech companies you think that, let me back up. Patrice said that she's being contacted by several companies looking to break into this space that are emerging. Can you name some specific companies that you think are really moving into this space and might actually be offering something very promising for international enrollment management?
I think for me specifically, School Apply, IDP, they're known already in the field in terms of what they've been doing pre-COVID. I'm always leery in with companies who are trying to try a thing. They're just trying, and then you're having to use like beta technology in a sense where when funds are limited, it's difficult to be the guinea pig of sorts. So I've been leery about it, but I'm not saying that people shouldn't try from an organization that they may have already known, but don't expect quick results. So those are some of the gateway companies that I've used in the past that I've had great success with.
Very interesting. Thank you, Patrice.
Thank you, Patrice. And we would like to ask also another question to Patrice about what is, in your opinion, the biggest pitfall today to try to avoid?
I think for me, my biggest pitfall, I promise you, is being roped into a scenario where companies are trying something. So you always have to ask them whether or not this is like a beta version, or because this is pre-COVID. I've had the experience where not asking the right questions led me to pay for something that I realized later on down the road that it wasn't tested. And if it's not really tested and tried and true, you're not necessarily going to know what results you're supposed to get. So ask for a very discounted rate, or, ask them for, like, I'll be the guinea pig if I don't have to necessarily pay for it. So I think those are questions. That's my biggest pitfall that I've had to date.
Thank you so much, Patrice. And a last question for Brian. Brian, can agencies be EdTech companies?
Good question. I think what we're seeing is that EdTech companies are moving into the agency space, and agencies are adopting EdTech practices, recruitment agencies. So I think it's happening from both directions, let's say. And when you think about it, I mean, it's an emerging business and operational model, right, which has proven effective in so many aspects of our lives. So one would expect that this would happen within our field as well, that we would see applications that improve efficiency, connections with consumers. In the end, of course, the standards that ERC has, they are oriented towards benefiting the individual student experience. So that means the EdTech company or the agency should benefit the student in terms of their choice, the information they receive, the advisement that they receive, and eventually, of course, the quality of their enrollment experience and the outcomes of their education. So that's the important question. You know, I think we have to rely on what we know are very good standards of good practice and what we know about excellent outcomes, educational outcomes for students. In a way, the practices that we use, the models that we organize ourselves under, you know, are secondary. As long as they effectively yield good results and a quality experience for students and families and partners involved, then we can be assured that things are working well.
And if I could chime in on that, one of the things I pay attention to, and even just in my own day-to-day work, as the shift to the EdTech, under that EdTech umbrella, you know, a lot of the platforms in enrollment management have been focused on lead and prospect generation, which is a very big part of the whole process. But as universities' budget tighten and people are looking at every dollar, some folks can look at the agency model with a commission for an enrolled student as a very high return on investment, almost a perfect return on investment, because you can see that relationship. But like anything, you can't put all of your eggs in just that one basket. You have to have a lot of recruitment modalities if you want to have a diverse class with all the qualities that we focus on in enrollment management. So really, really great questions, and appreciate the answers from all the panelists. Are there any last minute questions that came in, Rosa?
No, not so far. So thank you for the questions that came, and thank you for all of the attendees today, and especially to all the panelists.
Yes, thank you so much. And, you know, in the fall, we will be working on a new Gateway Leadership Institute and a webinar series. And right now we're going to be focusing on a discussion about duty of care and, you know, where is that taking us? And it's going to be so rich. So please continue to visit the Gateway International website to keep current. There are many goings on with Gateway International, not just our Gateway Institute and webinar series. So please pay attention to that on a regular basis. But thank you to all our panelists today, and of course for our strategic partners and sponsors who make all of this possible. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for staying on a little bit past the hour, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.